I sat on the edge of our bed, the familiar quilt beneath me feeling heavier than usual. My husband, Mark, had brought up the idea of an open relationship again. The words hung in the air like a dense fog, obscuring everything I thought I knew about us. I looked at him, his face a mix of hope and uncertainty. "It could be good for us," he said, his voice steady but layered with anxiety. It was the same pitch he used when he tried to convince me to try that new restaurant downtown. "Good for us?" I echoed, my mind racing through memories of our years together, our wedding day, family vacations, quiet evenings spent on the couch watching reruns of old sitcoms. The thought of inviting someone else into that sacred space felt wrong. Yet, there was something in Mark's eyes that made me hesitate. Maybe this was an opportunity to rekindle something we had lost along the way. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "I have a friend in mind," he said. My heart skipped a beat. The idea of another man wasn't just abstract anymore, it had a name attached to it. I felt my stomach twist at the thought of meeting someone new under these circumstances, a stranger becoming part of our lives by choice. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even while my pulse quickened. "Who is it?" "His name is David," Mark replied, and I could see him gauging my reaction closely. "He's been through some stuff too, I think you'd get along well." David was someone I knew only in passing, a friendly face at neighborhood gatherings but never someone I would have imagined sharing such an intimate arrangement with. The thought was unsettling yet oddly intriguing. I glanced out the window at the oak tree in our front yard, its leaves beginning to turn golden with autumn's approach. Change was in the air, perhaps it was time for me to embrace it too. What if we just met him first? You know, just to see how it feels? The words tumbled out before I could second-guess myself. Mark's expression brightened instantly. He nodded eagerly as if my suggestion had lifted a weight off his shoulders. "Exactly. Let's meet up this weekend." As we discussed logistics over dinner, where to meet and what to say, I couldn't shake off the unease creeping in alongside curiosity. It felt like walking into uncharted territory without a map. Later that night, while brushing my teeth, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Mark flashed across the screen. "Let's plan for Saturday afternoon with David." My heart raced again, not from excitement but from dread at what this weekend might bring. I placed my toothbrush down and stared at the message for a moment longer than necessary before responding with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Inside, though, questions swirled like leaves caught in a gust of wind. Would meeting David change everything? Would my life become more complicated than it already felt? In bed that night, sleep eluded me as thoughts spiraled around possibilities and consequences like a restless tide pulling me under. The more I considered this experiment in trust Mark proposed, the less sure I became about what lay ahead. Saturday arrived too quickly for comfort. As I prepared for our meeting at Café de la Vida, a local spot known for its rich coffee and vibrant atmosphere, I found myself fidgeting with my necklace as if it could provide some sort of protection against whatever awaited me there. The cafe buzzed with chatter and laughter as we entered, sunlight streamed through large windows illuminating rustic wooden tables adorned with colorful flowers. Mark spotted David right away. He sat alone at a corner table nursing an espresso while glancing around nervously. "Hey there," Mark called out cheerfully as we approached. David looked up and smiled warmly but nervously. His eyes darted between us as if trying to gauge our dynamic before making any moves of his own. "Thanks for meeting us," I said politely as we settled into our seats across from him. The conversation started innocently enough, discussing favorite books and local events, but soon shifted into deeper waters when Mark casually mentioned how this arrangement came about. David raised an eyebrow but didn't recoil. Instead, he leaned back slightly and took a sip from his cup before responding thoughtfully. "That's definitely an interesting approach." His tone was neutral yet curious, like someone weighing options rather than dismissing them outright, and part of me appreciated that openness amidst all this uncertainty. As they continued talking about art exhibits happening around town, something David seemed passionate about, I found myself drifting slightly from their conversation while observing how easily they connected over shared interests. But beneath that surface-level ease lurked tension within me, a fear creeping back that perhaps this experiment wouldn't merely be about exploration but rather unraveling everything I'd held dear for so long. When David suddenly turned toward me with genuine interest in his gaze asking what kind of art inspired me most, it jolted me back into focus momentarily, but also reminded me why we were here. Exploration under unfamiliar circumstances where boundaries could blur unexpectedly. I took a deep breath before answering carefully, sensing both men watching intently as if awaiting some revelation from within myself that might reshape everything moving forward. Yet all I felt was confusion swirling inside like storm clouds gathering overhead ready to burst forth without warning. Just then, Mark's phone buzzed on the table between us, a reminder notification about an upcoming event, and instinctively reached over to silence it without thinking twice about disrupting our flow entirely until realization struck hard. This wasn't just casual coffee anymore. Decisions were looming larger than life itself, threatening to change everything we knew forevermore. Before long though, after several more exchanges filled with laughter mixed alongside underlying tensions, the afternoon slipped away faster than expected, leaving behind only questions lingering heavy between us while departing from Café de la Vida feeling both lighter yet burdened by choices made along this unexpected journey. I walked out of Café de la Vida, the sun casting long shadows on the pavement. My heart raced, a mix of exhilaration and anxiety coursing through me. I had just shared a moment with someone I barely knew, and yet it felt strangely significant. As I turned the corner, my phone buzzed again. Mark's name lit up the screen. "Hey, how did it go?" he texted. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating to respond with anything more than a simple acknowledgement. I was still processing everything that had just happened. A part of me wanted to tell him about our connection, but another part urged caution. Instead, I typed back, "It was fine. Just coffee." The response came almost immediately, "Let's meet later to talk." The request sent a wave of dread through me. How could I explain what had transpired without revealing too much? I agreed, knowing full well that our conversation would not be easy. Once home, I found Mark sitting on the couch, his brow furrowed in thought as he flipped through channels on the TV without really watching anything. The familiar sight of him brought comfort yet also reminded me of the tension building between us. "How was your day?" he asked casually, but there was an edge to his tone. "It was good," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just busy with errands." He nodded but didn't seem convinced. The air felt thick with unspoken words as we settled into an uneasy silence. My mind drifted back to my encounter at the cafe, the way we laughed together and how our conversation flowed effortlessly. It wasn't supposed to feel that way with someone new, it should have felt wrong. When Mark finally broke the silence, he leaned forward slightly and asked, "So, did you think about what we discussed?" His eyes searched mine for answers that were still forming in my mind. "Yes," I said slowly, weighing my words carefully. "I'm trying to understand what this means for us." Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Matteo, the man from the cafe. "Can we meet again? There's something about you." My heart skipped a beat at his words. "Who is it?" Mark asked sharply as he noticed my expression change. "It's just a friend," I replied quickly, hoping to deflect his curiosity without raising suspicion. Mark raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he suggested we go for a walk to clear our heads, a routine we often followed when things felt heavy between us. As we strolled through our neighborhood park filled with blooming flowers and children laughing nearby, I struggled with conflicting emotions swirling within me. "I want us to be honest with each other," Mark said suddenly as we paused by a bench under a large oak tree. This whole experiment, it can't work if we're not open. His sincerity caught me off guard. It made me feel guilty for hiding parts of myself already. I agree, I said quietly while glancing down at the grass beneath my feet. Mark continued speaking about trust and boundaries while I nodded along absent-mindedly, my thoughts drifting back to Matteo and how easy it had been to connect with him over coffee just hours earlier. Later that evening, after dinner preparations were complete and our plates cleared away from the table, the weight of unsaid feelings hung heavily in the air. I decided it was time for honesty despite my fears of where this path might lead us both. Mark, I began hesitantly before taking a deep breath to steady myself against whatever storm may come next. I met someone today. His expression shifted instantly from curiosity into something darker as he processed my words slowly like they were foreign concepts altogether. What do you mean? We kissed, I blurted out before fear could hold me back any longer, a momentary lapse in judgment that left both of us stunned into silence as reality set in heavy around us like fog rolling across an empty field. What? His voice rose louder than intended, anger flared briefly before confusion took over instead, his eyes searching mine desperately for clarity amid chaos unfolding right in front of him. I didn't plan for this. I rushed out defensively while feeling regret wash over me like cold water splashing against bare skin unexpectedly during winter months when warmth feels far away from reach altogether now more than ever before. Before Mark could respond further or process any more emotions swirling between us, the shrill ring of my phone cut through tension thickening around us like smoke rising high above flames consuming everything familiar below. I stepped outside, leaving Mark behind in the cafe. The air felt heavy with unspoken words, and I could still hear the faint buzz of chatter inside. My heart raced as I thought about my unexpected connection with the man he had suggested. I needed a distraction, something to ground me again. The art studio was just a few blocks away, a bright space filled with splashes of color and the scent of turpentine. As I entered, the familiar chaos of canvases and paintbrushes greeted me. I spotted Javier, the painter, setting up his easel. He looked up and smiled, but there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. "Are you ready for today?" he asked, his voice steady but curious. "I think so," I replied, my heart thumping in my chest. "I want to explore more, express myself." He nodded slowly, still cautious. Art can be an emotional journey. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. The studio felt like a sanctuary where I could escape my tangled life. As we began to work together on our project, I found myself captivated by his approach to painting. His brush strokes were confident and fluid, each movement telling a story. As we painted side by side, Javier shared stories about his life as an artist. He spoke about struggles and triumphs that resonated deeply within me. There was something about our exchange that felt electric, our laughter mingling with the colors on our canvases. In a moment of spontaneity, our hands brushed against each other while reaching for the same paint tube. "Lo siento," he said softly as our eyes met. "No need to apologize," I whispered back, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through me. Later that afternoon, inspired by our conversation and connection, I began to paint more freely than ever before. The colors flowed from my brush as if they were an extension of my emotions, vivid reds for passion and muted blues for uncertainty. It felt liberating. "Your work is captivating," Javier remarked as he observed my progress. "You have a unique voice." "Thank you," I replied shyly, feeling flattered yet vulnerable under his gaze. As we continued working together, he suggested we collaborate on an upcoming exhibition at the local gallery, a chance to showcase our combined talents. The idea thrilled me but also made me anxious about what it meant for my relationship with Mark. "Let's make it something special," Javier proposed with enthusiasm. I hesitated but eventually agreed. It felt like a step into uncharted territory, a way to reclaim parts of myself that had been dormant for too long. Just as we were wrapping up for the day, Javier turned serious and said, "Kate, would you be open to meeting again? Just us." His invitation hung in the air like an unanswered question. My heart raced at the prospect of spending more time alone with him. It both excited and terrified me. Yes, I stammered out before second-guessing myself again. Javier smiled softly but didn't push further. We cleaned up our space together in comfortable silence before parting ways outside the studio door. As I walked home that evening, thoughts swirled in my mind like leaves caught in a gust of wind, my marriage with Mark hanging precariously on one side while this new artistic connection pulled at my heart from another direction. When I finally arrived home, Mark was already waiting for me in the living room, a frown etched across his face as he glanced up from his phone when he heard me enter. "Where have you been?" he asked sharply. "I was at art class," I replied defensively while avoiding his gaze. "I thought you'd be back earlier." His tone held an edge that made me uneasy. "I lost track of time," I said quickly before changing the subject. "How was your day?" He shrugged dismissively but didn't take his eyes off me, as if searching for something hidden beneath my surface, a truth he couldn't quite grasp yet sensed existed between us now more than ever before. My phone buzzed suddenly on the table beside us. It was a message from Javier asking if we could meet tomorrow to discuss our project further, an innocent invitation that sent shivers down my spine while simultaneously igniting excitement within me once again. "Who's that?" Mark's voice cut through my thoughts like glass shattering against concrete, the tension returning full force between us once more. "It's just someone from class," I replied too quickly while trying not to show any signs of panic creeping up inside me like vines wrapping around fragile branches ready to snap at any moment. The art studio was bright, filled with the smell of paint and turpentine. I stood in front of a blank canvas, my heart racing. This was supposed to be a space for creativity, yet I felt more like a deer caught in headlights. The painter, Javier, was setting up his easel across the room, glancing at me with an encouraging smile. "Just let your feelings flow," he said softly. "No pressure." I nodded but felt the weight of expectation pressing down on me. How could I express myself when my mind was tangled with thoughts of my husband and our unconventional agreement? I picked up a brush hesitantly and dipped it into vibrant blue paint. The first stroke felt foreign, awkward even. As I painted, Javier moved closer to observe my work. "You're too hard on yourself," he remarked, tilting his head as he studied the canvas. "Art should be freeing." I sighed, "I just don't know how to start." "Let's talk while you paint," he suggested. We began to share stories about our lives, his upbringing in Spain and my childhood in a small Midwestern town. With each word exchanged, I felt a bond forming between us. Suddenly, our laughter filled the room as we reminisced about silly childhood memories. In that moment, the tension from earlier faded away. It felt good to connect with someone who understood me without judgment. Then it happened, our eyes locked for a moment too long. Without thinking, we leaned in and kissed softly. It was unexpected yet exhilarating. It ignited something inside me that had been dormant for years. We pulled apart quickly, both surprised by what had just occurred. "I shouldn't have done that," I said breathlessly. "Maybe it was meant to happen," Javier replied, looking conflicted yet intrigued. The kiss stirred feelings within me that were both thrilling and terrifying. I knew this was crossing a line I hadn't anticipated when embarking on this journey. As we resumed painting in silence, Javier broke the stillness again. "What if we collaborated on an exhibit together? We could showcase both our styles." His suggestion hung in the air like an electric charge. It raised the stakes significantly. My heart raced at the thought of putting myself out there publicly with him while navigating my marriage with Mark. "I'll think about it," I replied cautiously. The rest of our session passed in a blur of colors and half-formed ideas swirling around us like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. As we cleaned up afterward, Javier's expression turned serious again. "I can sense you're torn," he said gently as he packed away his supplies. I admitted quietly. "This whole experiment is complicated." He nodded knowingly but didn't press further. Instead, he offered me a warm smile that reassured me somehow despite the chaos brewing inside. After leaving the studio that evening, my mind raced with possibilities and consequences of what had just happened between us, both exhilarating and frightening at once. Later that night at home with Mark, I struggled to keep my emotions hidden beneath layers of normalcy as we prepared dinner together, a routine we had shared countless times before. "How was your day?" Mark asked casually while chopping vegetables at the counter. "It was fine," I replied too quickly again while trying not to let any hint of guilt seep into my voice. Mark paused for a moment before continuing his task without pressing further, perhaps sensing something was off but choosing not to confront it directly just yet. As dinner progressed into small talk about mundane topics like work and bills, an undercurrent of tension simmered beneath our exchanges, each word tinged with unspoken truths hovering between us like ghosts from another life. That night after dinner when Mark headed off to bed early due to fatigue from work stress, I found myself wandering back into my thoughts about Javier's offer for collaboration along with memories from our kiss lingering vividly in my mind like an unfinished painting begging for completion. I lay awake staring at the ceiling contemplating everything, the thrill of artistic freedom juxtaposed against loyalty toward Mark, a balancing act that seemed impossible now more than ever before. The art exhibit opened with a buzz of excitement, and I felt the weight of anticipation in the air. My collaboration with Javier was finally on display, and I stood among the vibrant canvases, each stroke telling a story. Mark had insisted on attending, but his jealousy simmered just beneath the surface. He couldn't hide it, even in this crowd. "Your work is stunning," he said, forcing a smile as he looked at one of my pieces. "You've really outdone yourself." "Thanks," I replied, trying to gauge his mood. The tension between us was palpable, and I could sense his discomfort as he eyed Javier across the room. As I moved from one painting to another, I overheard snippets of conversation from other guests praising my work. It filled me with unexpected joy. "You've really captured something special here," someone said. Their words wrapped around me like a warm embrace, igniting my passion for art anew. But then I saw Mark glaring at Javier, who was animatedly discussing one of my paintings with a group of admirers. The contrast between their energies was stark. Mark's stiff posture next to Javier's relaxed demeanor made my stomach churn. Was this really how our experiment was supposed to unfold? "Are you sure you want to keep doing this?" Mark asked quietly as we stepped away from the crowd for a moment. His voice was low but edged with frustration. "I can't help but feel like he's taking advantage of you." I paused, unsure how to respond. "Javier and I have an artistic connection," I finally said, trying to keep my tone calm. "It's not just about him." Mark sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "It feels like more than that." Before I could respond, a mutual friend approached us with an inquisitive look on her face. "Kate. You look amazing tonight. How's everything going with your new project?" she asked pointedly. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as both men turned their attention toward me expectantly. "It's going well," I managed to say while glancing at Mark's tight-lipped expression. "I heard you two are getting pretty close," she continued, her voice laced with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Mark interjected sharply, clearly feeling cornered. "I just meant that your collaboration seems intense," she replied innocently before drifting away into the crowd. The awkwardness hung thick in the air between us afterward. Mark's jealousy was palpable now. It felt like an anchor dragging me down into murky waters. As we returned to the exhibit floor, I caught sight of Javier smiling at me from across the room, a smile that ignited something inside me that had been dormant for too long. "Let's go get some fresh air," I suggested to Mark, needing space to breathe away from the tension building inside me. Outside on the balcony overlooking the city lights, we stood in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I don't want to lose you over this experiment," he said quietly. My heart sank at his words. They were filled with vulnerability yet tinged with possessiveness that made me uneasy. "Mark." He interrupted me again. "I know it's supposed to be about freedom and trust, but what if it ends up tearing us apart?" A chill ran down my spine at his implication. Could this really unravel everything we'd built? Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Javier asking if we could talk later tonight after the exhibit closed. "Do you need to take that?" Mark asked sharply when he noticed my hesitation. "No," I replied quickly, shoving my phone back into my pocket while feeling torn between two worlds, one grounded in familiarity and another bursting with potential. As we returned inside together, applause erupted around us for another artist being recognized for their work, a reminder of what success looked like in our field and how far away it felt right now amidst our personal turmoil. "Let's try to enjoy this night," Mark suggested half-heartedly as we rejoined the crowd filled with laughter and chatter, the sounds swirling around me like paint mixing on a canvas but leaving behind uncertainty instead of clarity. The night wore on without resolution. Conversations buzzed around us while doubts clung tightly within me like wet paint refusing to dry completely, a constant reminder that every choice carried consequences far beyond what either of us anticipated when embarking on this journey together. As we prepared to leave later that evening after saying goodbye to friends and colleagues alike, my heart raced at what lay ahead. Would it be another meeting with Javier? Would it deepen our connection or unravel everything? The door swung open behind us just as we stepped outside into cool night air, a figure emerging unexpectedly from within, the unmistakable silhouette of Javier standing there waiting for me under dim streetlights illuminating our paths ahead. I felt a rush of emotions as I stepped toward Javier, the night air thick with anticipation. His presence was magnetic, drawing me in as if we were the only two people in the world. "I'm glad you came," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I could see the warmth in his eyes, and it ignited something within me. We walked side by side, the city around us buzzing with life. The sounds of laughter and music spilled from nearby bars, but all I could focus on was him. The weight of my guilt lingered like a shadow, but the thrill of being with him overshadowed it for now. We reached his studio, and he opened the door, inviting me into a space filled with vibrant colors and unfinished canvases. "Let's create something together," he suggested, motioning to a blank canvas awaiting our touch. As we began to paint, our hands brushed against each other frequently. Each accidental contact sent a jolt through me, blurring the lines between art and emotion. We shared stories about our lives, his struggles as an artist and my journey through marriage, each revelation deepening our bond. "We spent the night together," he said at one point, his voice laced with sincerity as we painted side by side under soft lighting. I felt an overwhelming urge to lean closer, to bridge the gap between us that had been slowly dissolving throughout our time together. The connection was undeniable. It felt like we were creating not just art but something far more profound. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the table beside us. I glanced at it and saw my husband's name flashing on the screen. Panic surged through me as I hesitated to answer. "You should take that," Javier urged gently, sensing my unease. I shook my head. I didn't want to break this moment. After several rings, curiosity got the better of me. "What do I say?" I whispered to Javier, feeling torn between two worlds once again. "Just be honest," he replied softly. Taking a deep breath, I answered the call. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Where are you?" My husband's voice sounded strained and filled with concern. "I'm just working late at the studio." My heart raced as I spoke those words. "Working late? You never do that." There was an edge in his tone that made me uncomfortable. I know, I replied quickly. But it's important for my project. There was silence on the other end before he finally said, "Just come home soon." The call ended abruptly, leaving me feeling even more conflicted than before. I looked at Javier, his expression mirrored my turmoil. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted quietly. The weight of my choices pressed down heavily on me now. "We can take a break if you need to think," he offered. But instead of stepping back from this connection we had forged through creativity and vulnerability, I found myself leaning in closer again, a part of me wanting to escape reality for just a little longer before facing what awaited at home. As we continued painting into the night, laughter mixed with silence filled the room until it became intoxicatingly familiar, a sanctuary away from everything else pressing upon us both outside these walls. Yet every stroke of paint reminded me of what lay beyond this moment, the life that awaited me filled with expectations and doubts swirling around like colors on our canvas. Then suddenly there was another buzz, this time more urgent than before, and when I glanced down again at my phone screen, it was another message from my husband, "I'm worried about you." The words hit hard like a splash of cold water against warm skin. Reality crashed back in full force as guilt clawed at my chest anew. What had started as an experiment had spiraled into something far more complicated than either of us anticipated. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. My husband's concern felt like a weight pressing down on me. I had promised to be open and honest, yet here I was, caught in a web of secrets. The idea of a double date with the painter lingered in my mind, igniting a mix of excitement and dread. Could I really bring him into my home while keeping my husband unaware of the true nature of our relationship? Later that evening, as I prepared dinner, the thought of my husband's proposal gnawed at me. A double date could either strengthen our bond or shatter it completely. I chopped vegetables with shaky hands, imagining the tension that would fill the room if both men were present. "What am I doing?" I muttered under my breath. Just then, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. My heart raced as I opened the door to find the painter standing there, a canvas tucked under his arm. "I thought we could work on something together," he said with an easy smile that made my stomach flutter. My mind raced with questions about how he had come to be here unannounced. "Now? Like this?" I stammered, glancing back into the house where my husband could walk in at any moment. The painter stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence filling the space with an undeniable energy. "I wanted to surprise you," he said casually, setting down the canvas on the kitchen table. "I thought we could brainstorm ideas for your next piece." His enthusiasm was infectious but also overwhelming. I felt trapped between two worlds. As we began discussing colors and themes, I tried to focus on art rather than the chaos brewing in my mind. However, every laugh and shared glance felt like a betrayal to my husband's trust. Just then, my phone buzzed again, a text from him asking when I'd be home. "Do you think we should reschedule?" I asked hesitantly, glancing at the painter who seemed oblivious to my internal conflict. He shook his head firmly. "No way. Let's keep going." His confidence was alluring but reckless. It tugged at something deep within me that craved freedom from expectations. Before long, laughter filled the kitchen as we painted together. The painter's talent inspired me, colors danced across the canvas under his guidance. But guilt loomed over me like a dark cloud. My husband would be home soon and would sense something was off if he walked into this scene. Just as panic began to set in again, there was another knock at the door, this time more insistent than before. My heart sank as I realized who it might be. "It's probably him," I whispered urgently to the painter. "Let's just act natural," he replied with a grin that made me question everything once more. I opened the door cautiously and found my husband standing there with an expectant look on his face. "Hey. You're home early." My voice sounded strained even to me as I stepped aside for him to enter. "What's going on?" he asked immediately, noticing the painting supplies scattered around and his eyes darting toward the canvas still wet with paint. Just working on some ideas, I stammered awkwardly while trying not to meet his gaze directly. The tension in the room thickened as they exchanged glances, two men standing in stark contrast yet somehow connected through me. "You didn't mention you'd have company," he said slowly, suspicion creeping into his tone. "I didn't think it would matter," I replied defensively before catching myself. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. This experiment was meant to explore trust and openness without judgment or jealousy. The painter chimed in smoothly, "I'm just helping Kate with her art project." There was an ease in his voice that contrasted sharply with my growing anxiety. My husband nodded slowly but remained unconvinced. It was clear he sensed something deeper between us than mere collaboration on art projects. "Well, maybe we should all sit down together," he suggested tentatively. The invitation hung heavy in the air as uncertainty gripped me tighter than ever before. How could we navigate this new dynamic without losing ourselves? As they both settled into chairs at our small dining table, I realized that no matter how hard we tried to keep things light-hearted and casual, underlying tensions were rising like tides ready to crash against each other. "Let's make this fun," the painter suddenly declared while reaching for some snacks laid out nearby, a feeble attempt at diffusing mounting pressure. But it did little to ease my worries about what lay ahead during this unexpected gathering of hearts entwined by choices none of us fully understood yet. As conversation flowed awkwardly around us like water through fingers slipping away too quickly, one thing became clear: navigating these relationships would require more than just trust. It demanded honesty amidst chaos and vulnerability amidst fear. The tension at the table was palpable. My husband, Mark, smiled tightly, trying to mask his discomfort as he engaged in small talk with the painter, Luis. I could sense the underlying current of competition between them. Every glance exchanged felt like a challenge, a silent battle for my attention. I took a sip of my wine, hoping it would steady my nerves. "Luis, how's your latest project coming along?" Mark asked, his tone casual but edged with something sharper. I noticed how Luis's expression shifted slightly, as if he were weighing his words carefully. "It's coming together," he replied, glancing at me before continuing. "Kate has been a huge help." The way he said my name sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to contribute to the conversation but felt trapped between two worlds. My heart raced as I recalled our late-night art sessions where we shared more than just paint and canvas. We shared parts of ourselves that had long been buried under routine and expectation. Suddenly, an argument erupted over something trivial: who preferred which artist, turning the air electric with unresolved emotions. "Why do you care so much about this?" I snapped at Mark, feeling frustration bubble up. "It's just art." The moment those words left my mouth, I realized they weren't just about art, they were about everything we were trying to navigate together, or apart. Mark leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. "It matters because it's part of who you are now," he shot back. "Maybe I'm just trying to understand this new side of you." His voice was steady but strained, revealing the cracks in our arrangement. Luis interjected softly, "We're all here to support Kate's journey." His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the brewing storm at the table. I could see both men wrestling for my approval and understanding, a tug-of-war that left me feeling more isolated than ever. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew heavier with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Each time Luis looked at me with that spark of connection we had forged through our creative endeavors, Mark's gaze would darken further. It was clear that neither man wanted to back down from their positions. Then it happened. A small comment from Mark ignited a flame that quickly engulfed us all. "You think you can just swoop in and take her away from me?" he accused Luis sharply. The accusation hung in the air like an unwelcome guest. I felt my heart race as both men stood their ground. "This isn't about possession," Luis replied evenly but firmly. clearly taken aback by Mark's intensity. Kate is her own person. The truth in his words struck me hard. I had been lost between their expectations and my own desires. I didn't ask for any of this. I shouted suddenly, feeling overwhelmed by emotions swirling inside me like a tempest. Both men turned to look at me in shock. It was clear they hadn't expected me to explode like this. Without another word, I stood up from the table and rushed outside into the cool night air, leaving behind two confused and angry men grappling with their own feelings of betrayal and misunderstanding. The streetlights flickered above me as I paced back and forth on the sidewalk outside our home. I felt torn, the weight of my choices pressing down on me like a heavy blanket suffocating any clarity I sought amid chaos. How had things escalated so quickly? The evening had started as an experiment meant to bridge gaps but ended up exposing deeper fissures within us all. As I stood there alone under the stars, breathing deeply to quell my racing heart, I realized something profound. This experiment was revealing truths about myself that were far more complex than any simple relationship arrangement could convey. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Mark's name flashing across the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to answer it just yet. Instead, I stared into space while grappling with what lay ahead, two paths diverging before me, one leading back into familiar chaos and another toward uncertainty but perhaps freedom too. The night air grew colder as minutes passed without resolution or comfort from either man who cared for me in different ways yet struggled against each other for dominance over my heart and mind alike. Finally, taking a deep breath again filled with determination mixed with fear, I knew one thing. Whatever happened next would change everything forever. The morning light crept through the curtains, illuminating the chaos of my thoughts. I felt an uneasy tension in the air as I prepared breakfast, the silence thick enough to cut. My husband, Tom, sat at the table, his gaze fixed on his coffee. He had been distant since our disastrous double date. "Are we going to talk about last night?" he finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "I don't know what to say," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Things got out of hand." Tom's expression hardened. "You seemed more interested in him than me." I looked down at my mug, feeling trapped between two worlds. The connection with the painter had taken me by surprise, yet here I was, grappling with my loyalty to Tom and my growing feelings for someone else. Later that day, Tom proposed something that shocked me to my core. What if we just opened everything up? A full open relationship? His words hung in the air like a challenge. "Is that really what you want?" I asked cautiously, my heart racing at the thought of limitless possibilities yet feeling cornered by them. "Maybe it's what we need," he said, shrugging as if it were a simple solution to our complex situation. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being backed into a corner. The options felt overwhelming. Freedom came with its own set of chains. As I left for my art studio later that day, I clutched a letter from the gallery inviting me for a solo showcase, a glimmer of hope amid the turmoil. In the studio, surrounded by canvases splashed with color and creativity, I tried to focus on my work but found it difficult to concentrate. The weight of Tom's proposal loomed over me like an unwanted shadow. Just then, the painter walked in unannounced. "Hey," he said casually, but his eyes searched mine for answers. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised yet relieved to see him. "I wanted to see how you were doing after last night," he replied softly. I sighed and gestured toward a blank canvas. "It's been complicated." He stepped closer and offered a reassuring smile. "Let's paint together today." As we worked side by side in comfortable silence, our brushes danced across the canvas, a reflection of our unspoken connection. Suddenly, he paused and turned toward me. "You know you can be honest with me about everything." I hesitated but felt compelled to share my turmoil with him. Tom suggested we open our marriage completely. The painter frowned slightly but remained calm. And how do you feel about that? It terrifies me, I admitted quietly. Just then, Tom called unexpectedly again, his voice strained with urgency as he asked where I was and who I was with. I'm at the studio, I replied tersely. Can we talk later? It's important, he insisted before hanging up abruptly. Once again left alone with my thoughts and this unexpected tension between us all three of us shared, I felt torn apart by conflicting desires and expectations from both men in my life. As evening approached and shadows lengthened in the studio, something shifted within me, clarity began to emerge amidst confusion. I picked up my brush again and began painting furiously. The strokes became more aggressive as if each one could somehow express what lay buried deep inside me. After hours lost in creation, a sudden realization hit me. This art show could be my moment of truth not just for others but also for myself. Perhaps it could help define who I truly wanted to be moving forward. But doubts crept back in when I thought about Tom waiting at home. Would he understand? Would either man accept whatever decision lay ahead? Leaving behind vibrant strokes on canvas under fading light filled me with both exhilaration and dread as whispers echoed around me about choices yet unmade. What would happen next? Just then an unexpected knock broke through my thoughts. The door swung open, revealing not just anyone but Tom himself standing there looking vulnerable yet determined all at once. His presence sent shockwaves through every fiber of my being as uncertainty filled every space between us. Tom stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. I felt a sudden rush of adrenaline. I didn't expect to see you here, I managed to say, trying to mask my surprise. I had to come, he replied, his voice steady but laced with urgency. We need to talk. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, pushing aside the colors and chaos of my art studio. I gestured for him to sit, my heart racing as I braced myself for what was to come. About us? I asked, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. I know this situation is complicated, but I can't ignore how we feel anymore. His confession sent a chill down my spine. It was the moment I'd both dreaded and secretly hoped for. As we spoke, every word felt like a step deeper into uncharted territory. He shared his thoughts on our connection, how it had evolved over time. I can't be just your collaborator, he said earnestly. I want more. My pulse quickened at the implication of his words. They stirred feelings I had been trying to suppress. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table, breaking the tension between us. It was a message from my husband. Are you still at the studio? We need to talk too. My stomach twisted at the thought of facing him after this conversation with Tom. I should go, I said abruptly, standing up and feeling a mix of regret and relief wash over me. Tom reached out, grabbing my wrist gently. Wait, he urged softly. You don't have to decide anything right now. But I knew that time was running out. I have to face him, I insisted, pulling away from his grasp. The reality of my double life loomed larger than ever as I stepped outside into the cool evening air. My heart raced as I drove home, each passing streetlight illuminating my conflicted thoughts. When I arrived home, Mark was waiting for me in the living room with an expression that mirrored my own turmoil, confusion and concern etched across his face. Where have you been? He asked sharply, his tone revealing more than just curiosity. I lost track of time at work, I replied carefully, avoiding his piercing gaze. The room felt charged with unspoken words as we stood there in silence for what seemed like an eternity. Kate, he began slowly, breaking through the tension that enveloped us both. We need clarity about this whole arrangement. His words struck me like a bolt of lightning. Clarity was exactly what I feared most right now. I know things have gotten complicated. My voice trailed off as memories flooded back, my secret meetings with Tom and the creative bond we had forged together against all odds. Mark's expression hardened slightly as if sensing my hesitation. Do you still want this? The open relationship? His question hung heavily in the air between us like an unresolved chord. I took a deep breath before answering him truthfully, I don't know anymore. Just then another message pinged on my phone. It was from Tom again. Can we meet tomorrow? There's something important we need to discuss. What's going on? Mark pressed further as if sensing that something deeper lay beneath the surface of our conversation. I've been exploring art, I replied evasively, unsure how much to reveal without exposing everything that had transpired between Tom and me. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly as he searched mine for answers that weren't there. Art? Or is it something else? His voice rose slightly in frustration. It felt like an accusation hanging in midair. Let's not do this now, I said firmly yet softly while stepping away from him towards our shared space filled with memories of better times together. But Mark wasn't ready to let it go. He stepped closer again and lowered his voice almost conspiratorially. If there's someone else involved, you need to tell me. The intensity in his gaze made me falter momentarily before steeling myself against any further revelations about Tom or our secret encounters together. I promise we'll talk about everything soon, I said finally, but knew deep down that soon wasn't enough time for either of us, especially not with tomorrow looming ahead filled with uncertainties yet unaddressed between all three participants involved in this tangled web we'd woven around ourselves. As Mark turned away frustratedly towards our bedroom, leaving me alone once more within these walls echoing memories past, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me, knowing tomorrow would bring choices none could escape from anymore. That night sleep eluded me entirely. Visions danced through my mind painting pictures both beautiful yet terrifying, while questions lingered unanswered beneath layers upon layers, waiting patiently for resolution never promised nor guaranteed ahead. With dawn breaking softly outside casting shadows across our quiet home, I received one last message before heading out, Mark asking if I'd truly committed fully or simply playing games when all along it seemed clear neither one truly understood what lay ahead.